If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel, it would really mean a lot. When the Boeing 787 launched, many people questioned how fierce competitor Airbus would compete with it. After all, the 787 was a clean sheet, offering customers unparalleled levels of efficiency while bringing a host of new critical technologies too for its customers. So when Airbus went forward with re-engineing its existing A330 series, which had up until that point been pretty successful, it definitely gave customers something to consider when it came to ordering aircraft, especially for those operators of the now aging A330-200 and A330-300, with the option to directly replace that with essentially the same aircraft instead of switching, say, plane makers. Insert Qantas into the equation, the Australian flag carrier which has operated the A330neo for a considerable period now. It has been essential to the long-term success the airline has enjoyed, not just domestically, but also internationally, with the A330's additional capacity being delightful on services even as short as Melbourne to Sydney, instead of, say, utilising the 737 series. But like any aircraft, Qantas eventually did need to decide on a replacement to their A330 series, aligning with their continued efforts to overhaul the fleet completely at the brand. That's where the project to replace this aircraft comes into play. The Qantas Group in 2022 announced its intent to retire the A330 in the future, the confirmation that we were all waiting for, but for most people, one that they didn't want to arrive. But with a retirement on the cards for this aircraft, a replacement was necessary. For all recent aircraft orders placed at Qantas in the past, the Australian carrier has gone with a very public announcement and plea. It's a plea that sees both Airbus and Boeing pitch their best offer to the airline, with a handful of types, say, pitted against each other, until Qantas determines which direction it would like to head. And very generally, when looking to replace the A330neo, a lot of people initially put the 787 and A330neo against each other, as naturally they were the ideal A330neo replacement. At Qantas, though, there was something very important to consider when pitting these two types together. Qantas already flies the 787 Dreamliner. They are hugely familiar with this. So did the A330neo really stand a chance? Many people would argue no, and it's something I want to explore a little bit further in this video. Now back onto what I said, that many people would argue the A330neo stood no chance. Why is this? Well, some will cite a host of reasons. Qantas would have needed to acquire these A330neos, if they hypothetically did, at a relatively lucrative and discounted price if they were to ever truly consider it. Why is this? Well, because at the time, the A350 series had already been ordered, and alongside that, so had the Boeing 787. Adding the A330neo to the mix, which is another aircraft type, probably wouldn't have been the best port of call. Some would argue that, say, the A330 does already exist, and you'd be correct, but Qantas does not intend it to be a part of their future operations. So when taking a look at this order, we're truly looking into the next 10 to 15 years and what their fleet will look like. Thus, by adding the A330neo on top of all the future aircraft types it has committed to, it just adds another aircraft, another engine type, and overcomplicates the existing fleet and pathways that have been set. Very quickly then, and unfortunately for some, the A330neo was really out of the running. For some carriers, it might truly work, but for others, it doesn't. And considering the 787's already pretty considerable presence in the market, many airlines, if they're, say, looking to replace their A330s, may just look towards a plane that is already proven to be very efficient for long-haul flights, maybe in the form of, say, orders for different variants to keep the simplification and flexibility within a single family there. For Qantas, well, that was very much a determining factor. Not only does it generally simplify their operations, but even when it comes down to pilots, crew, maintenance, and other factors, it's easier than introducing another aircraft type to just order more 787s. You can get into the economics of it, but simply put, that is the fact. Additionally, as part of commitment to aircraft, Qantas had already announced it would be acquiring the A321XLRs among many other narrow bodies like the A220, giving them truly optimal flexibility long into the future. The A321XLR is practical when replacing specific A330ceo routes, but not all of them. It does certainly lack if we're comparing the two, with available cargo volume paired with also the overall passenger capacity. One's a wide body and one is a single aisle. So if we're talking slot restricted airports, well, the A330 definitely is of a higher priority for Qantas. After much deliberation, the airline would eventually decide to order the A350 and Boeing 787 to replace its A330ceos and A380s. So as a result, the A330neo wasn't selected, despite many saying the 787 and 330neo go against each other as a replacement to the CEO. What all of this did highlight was the desire from the airline to replace its aircraft with types that it either had committed to or was already familiar enough with flying. The result of a mix between the two series means that 787s can likely be deployed on domestic operations, similar to what we see now with the A330s, or potentially onwards to Asia and more. For Qantas generally though, they have so much flexibility with this latest commitment for the 350s and 787s for future development on services that they see fit. When you pair that with the A220 and the A321XLRs, which capacity and range capabilities allow for secondary cities within Australia to get vital connections they're missing out on, the future is pretty exciting to say the least. It just needs to be executed in the right manner. The Airbus A330s will begin departing the airline within the next 5 years across what is a prolonged period. The A330's presence is huge at the moment within their fleet, so there is of course a lot to replace, and we're actually already seeing some of their Airbus A330s be converted into freighter aircraft and becoming A330 P2Fs and arriving back into Australia to complete crucial freight missions. Once all the aircraft though to replace the A330ceos arrive, well, their fleet will look very different, much more simplified and ultimately with only two wide bodies, the 787 and A350. Does this necessarily come as a shock? Well, no. Many airlines right around the globe, no matter their size, are looking to simplify. We saw that massively take place over the global pandemic, with many airlines taking the opportunity in a drop in capacity to retire older aircraft types and focus on streamlining to boost profits and efficiency. While the order that was recently placed isn't a one-for-one replacement for the 330s, many have their speculation, and as briefly touched on, the A321XLR can be deployed on some 330 routes, while the company also has significant options available on all their orders. So if in the future they see demand for more planes, they can activate these, permitting they're in the time frame. So now an A330ceo replacement has been booked in. It is still some time away. The debates will commence over how these new aircraft will be deployed to replicate the A330 and if not, achieve better results than what this plane did. Alongside that, people will question what the cabin makeup should be and how domestic units could potentially alter in configuration to long-range flights with the same aircraft or even towards Asia. Time will tell, but leave your thoughts down below in the comments. As mentioned, the A330neo is often pitted against the 787, but in this case, did the A330neo really stand a chance? It certainly doesn't seem that way. And how can you blame Qantas when they already have an aircraft that has been working fantastically, the 787, which they can go in and order more with favourable delivery slots, and no doubt for a favourable price. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this analysis. Again, if you have any thoughts, you're more than welcome to drop them down below in the comments. Appreciate the support, take care and be safe, and I'll see you next time.